What is worse is better?
It's this philosophical concept. And I would say it mostly comes up in software because software is different from a lot of other types of engineering in that people can create copies of your stuff for free. And for almost every other form of engineering, there's some sort of material involved. And so the cost of copying things is far, far higher. And that introduces this natural barrier. And so most forms of engineering, you run into things like, what bolt should I use? And then an engineer will say, let's do some analysis and use the best bolt. But in software, an engineer will say, well, everything is free. Like, what library should we use to do something, or what software product? They're all free. And so a lot of times the way that you determine what to use is more like, this is the one I'm familiar with, or this one has the most community support. That's actually a really big determining factor. People will call it like a best of breed solution, but often it just means the most idiots use it or whatever. And frequently software that is not as good, but first is really important here, will gain traction, and then people pick it because everyone else picked it. And being popular doesn't mean nothing necessarily. If 80% of people are using one piece of software and it's not as good, it still might be a better choice, because when you have a problem with it, someone will have solved your problem before. And in particular, things like Stack Overflow, which is a website where you can get question and answer style help on computer issues, programming mainly. You can use really janky software, and then you can go there and say, hey, I had a problem, what do I do? And someone else will be like, yeah, I had that problem too, here's the answer. And so a lot of people end up questioning, why are we stuck with this bad software? If you go back and look at this computer science research from the 70s, people figured out the right way to do this in the 70s, and then they implemented it in the 80s. Why isn't that used? And the answer is because the first thing that replicates ends up being the winner, where replication is defined as it achieves the state in someone's mind of this is legitimate software. And so once someone believes it's legitimate, then they spread that belief to other people, like a meme, and it'll spread throughout the community. And the first thing that gets uptake in terms of legitimacy has this massive head start, first mover advantage, and it's really difficult to displace it. And so you'll end up with something that's worse, but it did better. An example of that I've seen people point to is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a bunch of really janky little bits about it. And like, it has this infinitely growing ledger, and eventually it'll be so huge it'll be really hard for anyone to maintain. And it takes a really long time to process a transaction, and it can't process transactions very quickly. And it just has a bunch of things about it where if you thought about it for a long time, say a year or two, and came up with a bunch of candidate proposals and then implemented the best one, it would be a much stronger product. But then it wouldn't have been first to market. And simply by being first, it has won. And it's very difficult for any other cryptocurrency to displace it, because the cryptocurrency that everyone believes is the biggest one will also be the biggest one.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you don't run into that very much in your engineering.
No.
Maybe you do?
Yeah, because we have a lot of legacy software that's, some of it's as old as like 40 or 50 years old, and we keep using it even though it's bad.
But you might have other barriers, like certification.
One of our biggest barriers is guys don't want to stop using Fortran 77.
Mm. But you also have this big switching cost.
I think we would make it back eventually. We have a big problem that the main software I work on is written in Fortran 77, and it has no object orientation support. And it's just been maintained by like 60 people over the course of like 35 years or something, and it's just a disaster of a software program. So I do visit Stack Overflow a lot.
Does it have good Fortran 77 help?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Especially when you get into crap like common blocks. Like, common blocks was not even part of the standard. It was something that some company implemented in their compiler, and apparently we thought it was the best thing ever, so we have common blocks everywhere, and it's just...
Wait, are you saying common or comment?
Common. Common.
Oh, okay. I have no idea what that is.
It's like a memory structure that you can pass around so that stuff has scope and multiple functions.
Huh. Well, I can say from my perspective as a software engineer that I think it would be fine for you to keep using Fortran 77, but you just want to add a lot more tooling around like static type checking and static analysis and things like that. It's
Yeah.
okay to use. It's not a great language.
We were talking about adding a new, very large module to this piece of software recently. And we did finally decide to write it in C++, but all the old guys on the team were lobbying to write this brand new part in Fortran 77. They were like, let's just continue on the fail trade.
Well, I can also tell you that C++ is its own nightmare.
Oh, I feel like it's so much better.
It's its own nightmare. You'll see. You'll see. I guess you can't be garbage collected doing what you're doing at your undisclosed company. Otherwise, I would recommend something like Go.
Another issue with the software where I work, though, is that a lot of the people are not software developers. And so the people working on this are aerodynamicists and aerospace engineers and physicists and mathematicians. And so, suggesting Go, well, probably most of them have never even heard of it, where a lot of them have some experience with C at least, and maybe C++. And so it's easier for them to pick that up because they've probably had that in college in their one or two programming courses they had in their aerospace degree.
Yeah, actually, what I'd recommend for you is Ada. That's
Oh no.
that's pretty popular in.
That's like the Down syndrome brother of C++ or something. It's awful. We do have some software in Ada, and like I've worked in that before. It has this very nice like hard typecasting that lends itself to like physics and simulation and things like that. But I don't know, it just seems like a primitive version of C, and I would rather have C++ and have object orientation because I feel like it's so
Mm.
powerful.
Well, Ada it comes from the future of C because it was created afterwards. I really like the in-out annotation on parameters. I think that prevents a lot of classes of bug that people get into passing pointers around.
Yeah.
But I don't think object orientation is worth anything. And in particular, Go, which is a newer language, completely eschews objects. It doesn't even have the concept. It just has structs and functions, and then there's packages. And so, like, a struct and a function will be defined in a package, and it usually means they're intended to work together. But there's no idea of we encapsulate data and the functions that can execute on it together. Because, in my opinion, it's an irrelevant distinction to make. I have a great video to send you about object-oriented programming and why it's stupid. But for anyone who's listening who's a software engineer, I bet you've always suspected that something is up with object-oriented programming. And I would say something is indeed up with it, and it's pretty useless, and it's mostly harmful. You might even say it's considered harmful. But it's been really nice to get away with that, or get away from that in Go. And also when I write Python programs, which is pretty frequent, I don't really use objects or classes for the most part if I can avoid it.